Welcome everybody to the Baseball Blueprint podcast, your home for all things player development, where we highlight some of the best instructors in the game. Today we have host of the Baseball Coaches Unplugged podcast and the host of Athlete One podcast, Ken Carpenter. Ken, it's great to have you on the show.
Cody, really excited to get an opportunity to talk to you.
Well, let's kick it off right here. So, Ken, can you give us a little bit of background into how you started the Athlete One podcast and what kind of direction that took you?
Believe it or not, it was during the COVID-19 crisis back in 2020, and you're stuck in the house, and I thought, I got to come up with something to do, and I thought, let's try a podcast, and so I kind of just took it from there, and with no experience, no idea what I was doing, and my whole thing was I'm just going to keep going. I don't care how bad I am at it. And here I am. Believe like 110 episodes later.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, as someone who's able to get in there and listen to some of these, you do an incredible job. You make it so the guest is comfortable. This is one of those things where when I'm able to go listen to it, the way the questions are phrased allow me to immediately know like this is something I can take away and use for my group. So that's definitely appreciated from the listeners. And so diving into that kind of process that you have when it comes to selecting your guests, are there some certain things you look for?
The biggest thing I'm trying to do is trying to find a guest that's got a great story, and they are just good people. And I have yet to come across anybody that's not not a good person. So, and what I find it is, I'm looking for someone that's going to make, maybe they're going to solve a problem for a listener, as far as whether it's baseball, culture, communication with their players. I've even had young high school players on, and they talk about their experience with their coaches. So it ranges from high school all the way up to I've had a high school kid playing at Ohio State, to Paul Maneri, who was the great LSU coach, and most recently I had on Clint Hurdle, who was a major league manager. So it's been a lot of fun, because it's amazing how great the coaching community is.
Yeah, it's a special group. It's a special group, and I know that was something I was really nervous about starting out. I remember vividly. It was the Chicago ABCA was my first visit, and man, I was so nervous. But I'll tell you what, they had a whole thing where they had like a new coaches introduction thing where we were able to go that late evening and kind of meet everyone, and they would workshop us in. And man, what a special group we surrounded ourselves with. So. Diving more in towards the content of the messages that you're trying to hunt, are you guys just baseball specific with Athlete One, or is this something that you guys kind of veer off into different areas with?
Well, when I started Athlete One, I thought, okay, I'm going to try to cover all areas. I went with football players. I had a cross country skier. I've had a Canadian bobsledder, but primarily the majority of it has been baseball and some football coaches. And, but as I'm transitioning from Athlete One to Baseball Coaches Unplugged, I'm really going to try to zoom in on the what baseball coaches can do, and how they do it.
I love it. I love it. And then that's something that we've done on this podcast too, where we kind of tried to dive into the techniques and the teaching processes and you're going to crush that. That's going to be right up your alley. So I'm really excited to see some of those episodes as they come out. Can you kind of take us through what led you to like kind of diving into this podcast world from maybe just a career standpoint?
Well, I was in the middle of being a high school baseball coach. I was at Buckeye Valley for 14 years here in Ohio, and then I moved to Dublin, Scioto. And at the latter part of my time at Buckeye Valley, I got really, really sick, and I developed ulcerative colitis, and it quickly turned into what they called pancolitis. And the next thing I know, I am laying on a operating room table and having my large intestines and colon removed, and and didn't know it. But the night before the surgery, I had perforated my bowel, so flatlined a couple times during the process, and a couple-hour surgery turned into 7 hours of surgery. And I'm forever thankful for Dr. Bruce Kerner, who saved my life. No other way to put it. And but the thing is outside of my family, the other thing that kind of kept me going was I knew we had practices opening up in February, and I ended up having to take 4 months off of teaching, and that was my goal, to get back in. And I lived with a bag for several months and had that removed, and then I ended up coaching the last 10 years of my coaching career with what that I guess you could say I'm cured, but in the process, it's also the medications and things that I've taken. It's I got cancer from it, and but I always try to view it as there's a lot of people worse off than I am. Excuse me. And so I just kept going, and so the last 10 years I coached, taking handfuls of pills to try to stop the symptoms that come with what I have. And I was kind of came up with my own way of dealing with it. And the way I dealt with it in season was I would get up in the morning and I wouldn't eat or drink until I got home that night after the game or practice at 8 o'clock at night. And so I typically would lose 20 to 25 pounds a season just so I could be out on the field, because what I have, uh, you know, on a good day, I averaged 15 to 20 visits to the bathroom, you know, full disclosure. And,
Hmm.
you know, I just wanted to be around the game. And
Yeah.
so that led me to, when I got to 2020, I became so sick from it, I ended up having to take disability retirement. And I was like, I want to be around the game some way. So getting a chance to talk to coaches on a podcast is fantastic for me, because that's one of the big things I really miss is, as a coach, was you love being around the players, but you love being around the coaches too, because they're just such great people.
Wow. Oh well, Ken, thank you for sharing that story. That's a powerful message there. I know it's funny how this game kind of tethers us, back to reality. And there are some times where life hits, but the game's there. You know what I mean? So, wow, wow. That's special, and I'm glad you can be here. And I know the listeners of this podcast and the Athlete One and soon to be Baseball Coaches Unplugged podcast are super happy that you're doing this. This is absolutely something we're looking forward to you producing. So, thank you again for being able to do that. And I think from my directive here, the route I want to go with this is kind of twofold. Uh, First, I'd love it if you would dive into a little bit about how you prepare questions for your guests. I think that's something that is really cool, because some of the guests, you have a really wide range of levels that you address, and then also disciplines. There are guys, you got head coaches, you've got assistant coaches, you got high school head coaches. So let's dive into that a little bit here.
You know, I I try to treat it with, you got to be prepared. And I always try to find a nugget,
Yeah.
something that through my research, I'll go and start researching the guests that I'm going to have on. And, um, you know, I'd look for something that's going to really catch the listener's eye or ear, I guess you could say. And, like when we talked yesterday on the phone, one of those ones that I stumbled upon, which I had no idea, was I had Johnny Johnson on from, um, he's a coach in Alabama, and, great coach, but he happened to be a Texas Ranger bat boy. And, we talked about that, and he was the bat boy the night that Robin Ventura decided to charge the mound when Nolan Ryan was on the mound, and Nolan Ryan, as everybody knows, just put him in a headlock and just went to work on him. And but the best part about it was not only was he a part of that, he also had the owner of the Rangers uh, kind of yelled down to him and asked him if he went out there and went after the bat boy, just joking with him. And the owner at the time was former President George W. Bush.
That's wild. That's so cool. It's wonderful. Some of the stories you guys have on that podcast are great. And I think as someone who we talked about it a little bit earlier when we recorded for your podcast, but someone who's still getting their feet wet in this space, right? The stories you hear from some of these older coaches are incredible. And I said this on the podcast before, but I am a sucker for the nostalgia of the game and the stories there. My undergraduate degree is in history. That is my just area that I really love to focus in on. And so that's why I love talking to you so much, is because some of these stories that you get from these coaches who are more tenured, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? These are highlight reel stories that you're able to share with us. So I know from our end we really love that.
Yeah, I really enjoy that part of it. We talk a lot about things that players can do to become better, the whole culture and communication is and dealing with parents and different things like that. But when you really get into the stories of some of these coaches from around the country, and you know, there's a part of me wants to sit down and write a book of all the great stories, because there are every coach that you come across, and including yourself, even though you're young, I guarantee there's something that's happened either on a bus, on the baseball field, or whatever, that just the average person may not know about, and only the team knows about it. And when they share it, it's great, because I have a couple of my Army buddies. When I was in the Army, we jumped out of airplanes together, and he'll call me up, and we'll just start reminiscing about the story that whatever coach may have told.
Sure, that's awesome. So from the conglomerate of guests that you've had on your show, are there some maybe some features that you would say characteristic wise that the high performers tend to have? Let's say you got these really good coaches. What are some things that they do really well that you've noticed?
The the thing that jumps out right off the page at me is they the culture they establish, and when they show a player how much they care. And that's the thing that you know you can have the best talent, you can have a lot of great things in baseball, but when the players know you truly care about them, and you develop a culture that you know at first they may not buy into it, but by the end their senior year they understand it, and they get it. And probably the impact is 10, 15 years down the line, when they look back on their playing days, how important that was, and they're thankful that the coach held their feet to the fire.
It's awesome, and it's fantastic. You mentioned culture and the ability to care for your players. Same with my podcast guests. It's one of those things where they harp on the relationship piece so much, and I think again, we've talked about this, but being someone who's younger in the space anyway, sometimes those relationships are a little bit more difficult to cultivate because of the age gap is so tight. And I think finding the way that you can really hit the slot with, okay, yes, I care about you. You can tell I care about you in your career, but also you have this like wall here that's like, hey, I also am your coach. That becomes a difficult aspect to play with. And I know for you, you're a guy who you've worked with some really fantastic players, some guys who have played at Division One levels. In the high school space for you, was it ever a difficulty of, because you have this talent disparity that's a little bit greater than other levels? Was it difficult for you to create that boundary with them?
I kind of, when I first became a head coach, which happened in my second year of coaching, I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity with Tim Saunders at Dublin Kaufman, and I was just thrown into it, a year later. So, I believe that my relationship that I had with my high school coach, which I just went to his birthday And he's 70 years old and he looks younger than I do. Um, you know, he was a great influence on me, and you know, being in the military, you know, and jumping out of airplanes and being in a combat heavy engineering unit, all those things kind of helped me. But the thing that I, you know, thought that was important to me was, you know, everybody plays the game and everybody wants to win, and it's like, what are you willing to do to to become a winner? And you know, I was fortunate at Buckeye Valley because we had, it's a baseball community, and that was a great thing. And you know, I had guys that were hungry, and you know, it's a rural school, but they love the game, and we had a lot of success there. And you know, and then when I made the jump to Dublin, Scioto, which I made that jump because for 14, 15 years, I would drive, you know, from home to school to Buckeye Valley to home. And, you know, that was probably an hour and a half of driving every day. So I jumped to Dublin, Scioto, and, you know, one of the first things I asked, I just put out some questions to the players on a sheet of paper and had them fill it out. And guys just wanted to be 500. They're like, man, we just hope we can be 500. And I was like, you know, that's no way to go through life. You want to push yourself. And we got it to, you know, where we had the best season in probably the last 10 years, after a couple of years there. And, you know, it was great. It was great for me because I enjoyed it and I loved being able to help players.
Wow, that's special. I know there's a contrast there too when you make the move from Buckeye Valley to Scioto, and you're in a different conference now and you're playing against um, maybe not so much a different caliber of players, but maybe a different consistency in that caliber when you're seeing that in conference.
You know,
Was that a little bit different of a maybe level of focus that you really had to like lock in on some of those teams? Because I mean that's a crazy good conference that Soto's working in.
yes, we had in just our OCC division, uh, the level of talent was incredible. And you know, we didn't have quite that. We definitely didn't. Excuse me. We definitely didn't have that level of talent in the league with Buckeye Valley. But um, yeah, the you saw players every night that if you weren't on your A game, you were in trouble because they had to. Our guys had to step up, and the biggest challenge that I faced, you know, I came from Buckeye Valley to Dublin, Scioto, was very few players played travel baseball. So you know, we had it blew my mind. My first year at Dublin, Scioto, we had four guys that didn't even have a bat bag. And you know, so we had to, you know, really change the whole thought process there. And we had a lot of great guys and a lot of great players, and we uh, just kept working. And what I did was I said I got to put the best coaching staff I can come up with together. And I had uh, two two former draftees, guys that played for Ohio State, and you know, we had a staff that was phenomenal, that was willing to do whatever it took to make these guys better, and it paid off in the end.
That's awesome. Well, we'll kind of guide this into the closing because this is a question I've been wanting to ask you for a while. You mentioned you'd worked with Coach Saunders. Are there any moments or stories that you felt like from that relationship with him that you think really helped kind of guide your career?
Well, you know, it's different nowadays because everybody's got these, you know, great turf fields and everything. And I showed up because I grew up in Eastern Ohio where everything was a dirt infield except for maybe if you went to Steubenville to play. Um, and you know, people didn't work on the fields. I mean, the coaches got the fields ready, but not to the level that you see here in Central Ohio. And I showed up and I was like, I want to be a baseball coach because I started off as a football coach with him at Dublin Kaufman, and I was stunned at the field. I was like, wow, this guy cares this much about the field to make the best playing surface and experience for his guys. I said it was amazing. And if anybody knows Tim Saunders, which he's in just about every Hall of Fame there is,
Yep.
um, he's a great guy. He's willing to do anything for you, and he also was willing to let me do my thing, which I thought that was tremendous because here's a guy that's done so much and has won state title and coached Team USA and all these things. And he kind of says, all right, here, I want you to run with this and let you do it. Um, and he's been so helpful. And, I, in a, I never really told him this, but, when I got put into the Central District Hall of Fame this past year, when I finished my little 8-minute speech that they allow you to do, he stood up and started clapping immediately, and he was the first one, and I was like, wow, that it was special to me because it was he gave me my first opportunity.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. Ken, thank you for sharing those stories. Those are some special moments that you were able to share with our audience. And for those of you who haven't checked it out yet, make sure we check out Athlete One and also Ken's new podcast he's coming out with called Baseball Coaches Unplugged. That's probably going to be through Athlete One, if I'm correct.
Yes, it's actually I got the idea from you. It's I think we're going to call it Baseball Coaches Unplugged, presented by Athlete One.
I love it. I love it. Make sure we check that out. You can find him online. He's got Twitter, Facebook. Uh, so be able to dig into Athlete One. There's some great episodes there. I want to make sure we take a moment here to thank the Baseball Blue Book Network for partnering with this episode. We appreciate them. They support us a ton. If you haven't checked out their free app yet, make sure you get in touch with that. You're able to access recruiting, coaches, events. You'll be able to identify instructors in the area. So make sure we check that out. That's something that can absolutely help your program. And again, thanks guys for listening. This has been an awesome episode. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much. I know I've been podcasting for 3 years now, but if I was at the level you are at this early in your career, who knows where I could be? You do a fantastic job with baseball, the Baseball Blueprint podcast, and you've got a fan in me.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later.